After pointing the finger at US governors for 24 hours, the US president now pointing the finger once again at the World Health Organization, announcing that all US funding will be suspended to the world body.
As the organization's leading sponsor, the United States has a duty to insist on full accountability. One of the most dangerous and costly decisions from the WHO was its disastrous decision to oppose travel restrictions from China and other nations.
The US president also says he has the ultimate authority when it comes to deciding when the US economy is reopened. Governors, including those at the epicenter of the outbreak, say they don't want this fight, but they will decide when, how, and by how much their states will resume economic activities.
For the first time in 36 days, the Central Epidemic Command Center announced there were no new COVID-19 cases in Taiwan on Tuesday. Health Minister Chen Shizhong said it was a small moment of happiness, but the country must stay on high alert.
He went on to announce new rules for travelers that come into effect on Saturday. Anyone entering Taiwan from the U.S. or Europe will be asked to disclose details of their household to prove they can self-isolate effectively at home. Those without the right conditions to isolate at home will have to enter a quarantine hotel for 2 weeks.
At this hospital in occupied East Jerusalem, an improvised new ward has been set up. 16 beds readied to isolate patients who test positive for coronavirus. Already 3 patients who have tested positive have been sent to hospitals in West Jerusalem after an infected man from a nearby neighborhood visited his elderly father here. The hospital director says the Israeli government has failed to help prepare East Jerusalem's health system to tackle the pandemic. Not enough protective equipment, only 23 ventilators between 3 hospitals serving 350,000 people. The Israeli Health Ministry has said COVID-19 patients from East Jerusalem could be treated in the west of the city and that a major outbreak isn't expected. But in recent days, cases here have started to spike, despite attempts by local committees to enforce lockdown measures.
How to hold an election at a time of pandemic, carefully. In a country already following strict preventive measures, extra precautions are in force at polling stations. This was early voting last week that had a record turnout, including among coronavirus patients who were provided with their own polling stations. This polling station was in the country's most densely populated province around the capital, Seoul. Casting his vote early, President Moon Jae-in. Before this outbreak, he was struggling in the opinion polls with poor economic performance, domestic political scandals, and a stalled reconciliation policy with North Korea.
Shifting focus to India, where southern Indian metropolis Chennai has the highest number of COVID-19 cases. And the city's authorities are rushing to increase the number of quarantine facilities. Our correspondent Siddharth MP brings us this ground report from one such commercial venue turned into a quarantine facility. Take a look.
The Chennai Trade Center is one of the largest exhibition halls which is owned by the government in the city, and this facility has also been converted into a quarantine facility that has over 600 beds. This bolsters the city's efforts against the deadly coronavirus because currently the city is supposed to have around 10,000 beds and more beds are being added every single day so that if the need be, these beds also can be utilized as a quarantine facility.
Now, a crew member from the USS Theodore Roosevelt warship has died of complications related to COVID-19. The sailor tested positive at the end of March and was placed in isolation housing off the ship, along with 4 other sailors at the U.S. Navy base on Guam. Last week, he was found to be unresponsive during a health check and rushing to intensive care. Is the first person to die from a crew of more than 4,800, and the total of 585 people have tested positive. Pentagon leaders say the coronavirus could hit more Navy ships at sea.
Locally, government is refusing to give SAA any money. The airline's business rescue practitioners had requested a further 10 billion rand from government, but this has been turned down. The unions representing SAA's employees are keeping mum on this issue, though, saying they will only communicate in due course. In what was a leaked letter, Public Enterprises says it cannot support the extension of a foreign currency borrowing limit. It is also unable to provide additional funding beyond what has already been given to the airline. The ministry says lending guarantees will also not be provided in respect of the business rescue process. It says the COVID-19 pandemic has stretched national resources. SAA was placed under business rescue in December last year.
Members of Turkey's parliament have passed a prison reform bill. It will reduce the sentences of thousands of prisoners to ease overcrowding and prevent the further spread of coronavirus. But those serving time for crimes including murder, drug trafficking and rape, as well as detainees under Turkey's anti-terror laws, are not included in the new policy. The reforms seek to release minor offenders who have completed at least half of their sentence and will release those who have already served 2/3 of their sentence. While toughening sentences on various financial crimes, the reform will also enable home confinement for some inmates.
After nearly a month of lockdown, it's back to school for these young students in Copenhagen. Denmark, one of the first European countries to impose restrictions, is now the first to reopen daycares and elementary schools. Among the new requirements, a 2-meter distance between students and recess organized in small groups. The reopening is opposed by some parents, citing health concerns, but it's welcomed by others. Elsewhere in Copenhagen, these students received a surprise visit from the Prime Minister. The day before schools opened, she defended the move. Reopening schools is just the first step in a progressive easing of lockdown measures, as the number of new cases has fallen over the past couple weeks.